Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome back to Construct Your Life. This is Austin Linney here. I have my man, Mr. Ryan Johnson, in the house. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm doing great, man. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Man, thank you. Dude, before I get started, this is not just to blow smoke up your ass, but I just want to personally thank you for being a listener, listening to the podcast, taking your time to listen to it. You always have great feedback. And it just means the world to me. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation because I see you getting out there more. I see you on social media and you're crushing it. And we got to let the people know why you're crushing it. But what I want to do is I want you to tell your story, start where you want to, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to. Before I get into my story, I want to give your listeners a warning. This was a week of first for me. This is my first podcast episode, my first newsletter I sent out. And, I sent this newsletter to Austin, and within 10 minutes, he booked a Calendly appointment. And, I didn't think anything of it. He puts out a lot of content, and I thought maybe he was going to give me some constructive feedback on the newsletter. And about 6:45 the next morning, he was like, "Hey man, did you see the link I sent?" And I'm like, I'm brushing my teeth and I'm like, "Did I see it?" "Yeah, I saw it." And I look at the notes, and sure enough, he's like, "Hey, you're going to be on my podcast at 3:30 on Thursday. Be ready." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So where's the wisdom? Read the notes, because you don't want to book a Zoom call with Austin and end up being on a podcast and not know about it."
Fair enough. That's good.
Yeah. So yeah, my story, as far as investing goes in this life, I'm originally from Louisiana. I'm a Cajun boy, and like a lot of Cajun people, we're taking over Houston slowly. When I moved here 18 years ago, you couldn't really find crawfish in Houston, and now it's on every block. So slowly, our culture is mixing with the Texans very well. Career-wise, I do anesthesia for a living. I'm a nurse anesthetist. I put people to sleep in the operating room, and I followed what everyone else did. Right, you go to school, work hard, get a job. Moved to Houston as a nurse, and thought, where best to continue my medical career, but the top medical center in the world. So I went to grad school shortly after that to get the anesthesia degree, and I've been putting patients to sleep in the operating room around Houston for about 14 years now.
And the reason, not to mention, we'll get into the real estate stuff, but let's be honest. Like we don't need to dig into what you personally make, but as an anesthesiologist, a doctor, my dad was a doctor. I know you make good money, but at some point, where did the good money? Then I need to make some passive income, or I need to invest in real estate. What was kind of the inflection point for you in your career?
Yeah, about 7 years ago, I could tell something was somewhat missing professionally. I was, volunteering more time for money, trying to do projects at work, trying to just find some sense of growth at my job. And I realized that maybe it wasn't there, but about 5 years ago, I had a pivotal case that I did, and it was a pivotal, inflection point in my life. And, I was looking at this case before I was doing this patient, and, on paper, she looked bad, but where we work, it's expected that we take care of very sick patients all the time. You're not going to work there unless you can do that. But I had this really gut feeling that, something just wasn't right. And I didn't really want to do the case, and I didn't speak up. And, that's hindsight's 2020. And, it was an emergency surgery, and we brought the patient back to the operating room. And, 20 minutes later, my gut feeling came to reality. I'm doing CPR on this patient. And, ultimately, the outcome wasn't good, but it was no one's fault. No one made an error. It was just a very sick patient, a very critical case. And I think after that moment 5 years ago, I realized, hey, what am I doing here? Do I really want to be involved? Do I really want to be doing this until I'm 67 years old? Right. So I think I realized then and there that, in healthcare, a challenging day for a healthcare provider is someone dies, right? Or, a challenging day is your challenge is someone else's tragedy. And, at the time I was in my late 30s, and now I'm in my early 40s, but, people want to be challenged professionally, right? They don't want boring work. They want to be fulfilled. They want to be challenged. And because I think that's where you grow, is when you push through challenges, whether it's in relationships or professionally. You push through the challenges and you become a better person by getting through them. But you start to second guess those challenges when it involves someone else's tragedy. And, I think for many years, you walk into the hospital, and there's a saying in the hospital is that a boring day is a great day, right? Because a challenging day is, something bad may happen to someone. So that was the major inflection point with me in my career.
So what brought powerful story? What brought real estate into your point of view, into your focus?
Everyone always has this shoulda, coulda, woulda. I should have bought this, or I should have not have sold this. And before I had even read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or even knew really anything about real estate, I saw that land was appreciating in Houston, right? I was thought, if I would have bought 5 lots in my neighborhood and held those lots on for 5 years and not done anything with the lots and just flipped the lots, I would have made $500,000 easy. Mm-hmm. And I saw that as a missed opportunity. So I just started tracking lots on the MLS, cheaper lots in neighborhoods around my neighborhood in the path of progress. And my first real estate deal, I walked into the property auction at the Harris County on a Tuesday morning, never had bought a deal before, minus my personal houses. And I had a $45,000 worth of cashier's checks stuffed into my pocket. And I was the highest bidder on the lot. I bought it for $40,000. And that was my first real estate deal. I ultimately held that lot. I was going to team up with a builder and build 2 townhomes and flip them. But then we had a little event called Hurricane Harvey. And that, the building went crazy after that, and all the contractors were booked up. So ultimately I held that lot for about 18 months and I sold it for double my money in 18 months. And that was like a light bulb. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm onto something here.
Well, I guess what's interesting, right, is not a lot of people think to go in the lot. That's not something that you hear a lot. So what about that appease you instead of like flipping or doing stuff like that?
Honestly, at the time, I wasn't really in the real estate business when I was thinking about buying that lot. I was thinking like, hey, what if it was going to be another income stream? What if I bought a lot a year, held on to these things for 2-3 years, and then started flipping them? And if I'm making $40,000 a lot flip, that's an extra $40K that I can put in the bank. That's kind of my initial line of thinking. But during that whole time, that's when I guess I quote unquote got bitten by the real estate bug. I went down the bigger pockets rabbit hole, started read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, read Killing Sacred Cows. That's another really good book, and started learning about passive income. And during that whole period, not long after I sold that lot, I met an individual on Bigger Pockets who I consider to be my first real estate mentor. He didn't start out my mentor, but we developed a relationship. And after I'd get off of work at the hospital, I would go and see him at his projects. And he owned a smaller portfolio, not a smaller portfolio, but a large portfolio of single family and small multifamilies, probably 30 or 40 properties. He is what you call a professional landlord. He manages his own portfolio. He's his own contractor. He rehabs deals, flips deals. He can kind of do it all. And he had a skill set that I didn't have. So I started hanging out with him, and ultimately he, invited me to partner with him on a flip. And that's kind of all she wrote. I was a 50% equity partner. I only really got a small percentage of the profit, but for me, the experience was the most important. The profits really didn't matter.
Mm-hmm. How many homes did you flip with him?
I only flipped 2 homes actually with him. I flipped that with him, and I played a role, like I played an equity role, but I was like, okay, what could I do that I can learn and take some mundane task off his hands? So I'm like, hey, let me run your budget for you. So he gave me a budget. I put it out on a spreadsheet, and I was like, hey, as you buy things, as you pay contractors, just send me the receipts, and I'll keep constantly updating your budget. So that took a mundane task off of his plate, so he didn't have to worry about it, and it allowed me to grow in that. As a new investor, especially on the single family side, that's where you can really, go sideways on a deal. Is you don't know what you don't know, right? So someone comes and gives you a quote to paint a $1,500 house at $10,000, and you're like, oh, is that a good price? But once you start running the budgets of a successful real estate investor and see, okay, this is about how much generally this costs, you're less likely to get taken for a ride. So that was my value add to him, including the equity.
Some of the best real estate investors I've ever met had been contractors, or they had been, and so, and that's like, guys, if y'all didn't hear that, Like that was just a huge tip he just gave you. Like, because dude, I know what you're talking about. When I got in my second house, like a dude came and he was like, "Oh, the AC is going to be 10 grand." And I'm like, "Is it?" Like, I don't, And so like I had to call my brother-in-law at the time, and he's like, "No, no, dude, that's not right." So, like it really is. You can get taken for a ride really quickly. So that's a very smart thing you did to kind of, have a direct line to the budget so you can see those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the partnership worked out well. I did that flip, and during that flip, I ended up, I started using my home equity line of credit to do deals. And that was another aha moment for me. It's like I had equity in a house that my personal house had appreciated. And I was like, oh, wow, I can tap into this equity and build more equity. Awesome. So that's how I funded that flip. And I bought a rental and did my first Burr deal. This was in like 2000, I guess, early 2019, while we were doing that flip. Was able to pull most of the capital out, and I still own that asset. And me and the partner talked, and he was like, "Hey, look, I'm doing all these gut rehabs, and I feel like I just want to start building new construction. It would take me about the same time." And I'm like, "Well, hey, I want to do deals, so let's do a new construction. I'm willing to do it." So I funded all the equity on a new construction flip, and he built the deal, and it just kind of worked out. And that's how that was my first new construction project. And we kept going from there. I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast one time, and I heard Brandon and David. I was having a hard time in the acquisitions part. I wasn't I wasn't marketing for my own deals. That was probably a mistake that I made, and trying to chase deals from wholesalers. And I'm in the operating room at 2 p.m. putting grandma to sleep, and a wholesaler is texting me like, "Hey, can you come look at this deal at 2?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I can't do it." So I found I heard that podcast, and he was like, "Say, sometimes you can't find a deal. You have to put the puzzle pieces together and build a deal." And that was a light bulb. I'm like, "Hey, I'm working with a builder. Let's build a deal." And so I worked out a deal with him, and I'm like, "Hey, do you want to build me some rentals?" And he was like, "Sure. I want to, increase my building portfolio for the bank so they can see more projects." And we worked out a deal. So I bought a lot pretty soon after that, and I built my first duplex and implemented basically the Burr strategy on a build to rent duplex.
See, I think you hit on the aha moment the same that I did, is that I'm very busy. I travel a bunch. I don't have time to hunt down the wholesaler. And the number one thing that I hate is I don't like to be rushed. That's the number one thing I hate. And so I thought to myself, well, what makes sense? Well, if I buy a lot, it's probably been sitting there for a while, and I can just negotiate a price. And then if I build it, then I control the process from start to finish. So right, yeah. I think you kind of hit on the same thing that I hit on, and any other profit margins are good. But could you walk us through, because this is what we're going to be doing as well in the market with our construction and development company. So can you walk us through kind of the Burr model and the new construction, which I don't think is talked about enough?
Yeah. So, I didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. I looked like who's building new construction duplexes in the city. So I targeted those areas because, Houston is not it's not a zone. It's not a zone city. And that's one of the unique things about it. But you have to find these little pockets that don't have deed restrictions for multifamily. So you look for these areas, and hey, where everyone else is doing it, it must be okay to do it. So I saw these individuals, some were building to flip them, some were building to sell them. And I saw an opportunity in that the house hackers were really running up the prices on the duplexes, because if you crunch the numbers, if you house hack a duplex, the numbers totally work, right? You can overpay what the average investor is going to pay for it, because you're going to be living in it and you're getting the money so cheap that it just makes sense from a number standpoint. So they were really running up the comps. So I'm like, okay, so let's see if I can build for below the comp. So first you have to find a lot that allows you to build multifamily. So I knew the area that I was targeting. So I hit all the wholesalers, and wholesalers were giving me lots, and bought some off the MLS. And then after you buy the lot, you have to work with an architect or a drafter. In my case, I worked with a drafter, and they drew up the plans, and you go back and forth with the plans several times. And then once the plans are to your liking, then you submit, the architect or the drafter will submit them to the city, and you go through the permitting process, which in Houston for a product like that maybe takes 70 to 90 days. After that, it's a go. You give the project to the builder, and it's a go. And you just start, and he's building the project and getting constant inspections, and continues on and on. And after the deal's built, you rent it out and you start the refi process. And I was building it with a home equity line of credit, and then refinancing it to a traditional mortgage.
So what, the market's hot right now. I know they would sell quickly. What's the thought process behind wanting to hold them instead?
Ultimately, my plan initially was, hey, I'm going to see if I can build 10 of these in 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the initial goal. So I've built 2 so far, and I have 2 more potentially on the way. I just wanted cash flow, honestly. I wanted cash flow. I wanted to build passive income streams. They were going to be, I wanted to break into larger multifamily, but I'm like, maybe if I have 10 duplexes and I hold them for 5 years, I dump all the cash flow into different, larger deals, and then I liquidate them all, say year 5, and then I can roll into, larger properties with much more money to invest. So that was my initial goal.
What's a typical side of the duplex cash flowing in the new construction space?
For these, some of these cash flow like between $600 and $800 a month.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's crazy. So that's amazing. So
they're 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom, and like the most recent one I finished is renting for $1,300 a unit, so $2,600 for the total building.
Wonderful. And if I'm not mistaken, because I saw a picture the other day, are you invested in a large syndication as well too?
Yeah. So, I noticed that, at some point in my, shorter investing career that, I'm doing all these smaller deals, but, the content, I do consume a lot of content, a lot of mindset content, but then a lot of real estate content, and all the real estate content that I was consuming was larger stuff. Right. So I kind of had the goal, but had somewhat of a limited mindset of, okay, can I jump, do I need this much experience? Do I need this much of a track record? So, I set out and I was going to invest in a passive deal. So I invested in a passive deal at the end of 2020. I think it closed at the beginning of 21. It's been a great deal. It's a 228 unit passive deal in Houston. The operators have been great. Cash flow distribution started, I think maybe 2 months after closing. And I mean, it's been, with the way the market is in Houston, I mean, this thing is a smoking deal. I'm really liking it. That kind of sent me down into the multifamily space even more. I joined the Jake and Gino mentorship in February, and I've been kind of neck deep within that network, and it's been a really positive experience so far for me.
And whether or not you believe it, because I know how you think about yourself, but like the rise has been very quickly, like especially, you're like you say smaller deals, but building new construction is not a smaller deal, and then you invest in the big unit. What do you think has been the catalyst for you to move quickly and kind of like, because I know you still have limiting beliefs. I know you're still working on all these things. What has been kind of the catalyst with you moving so quickly?
I think, ultimately my goal was to create enough passive income to eventually step away from my job. And that is still one of my whys. I don't know if that's the why, but it's definitely one of my whys. But, I see a lot of burnout in healthcare. We just got through a global pandemic, but even before the global pandemic, we have our own little pandemic within the healthcare workforce. Is that, people are just, a lot of times healthcare, we use analogies to like a war zone, right? It's like, things maybe there's a dumpster fire in OR1, this person's trying to die in OR3. It's like a war zone here today. And, your comrades are not dying, but, some other patients are very, very sick. And chronic exposure to that just in general has, and with this pandemic just in general has burnt out the healthcare provider workforce. It doesn't matter really how much money you make. And, I kind of consider it my duty now is like, hey, I'm learning this stuff. I need to teach it. And, I'll talk to like say a new surgeon or a new ER doctor, and they'll be, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'm like, hey, I want to be an ER doc. I'm just starting my training. And one of the first things I'll ask them, I'm like, what do you think the burnout rate for an emergency room physician is? And their eyes will get really big, and they'll be like, and they get really serious, and they'll be like, it's actually quite high. And I'm like, yeah, it is quite high. So I feel that the ultimate hedge against burnout is passive income. And as a healthcare provider, there's a lot of pros for being a healthcare provider, right? The active income stream is large. We can pretty much work wherever we want in the country. We're in very high demand, but you do have to pay a price for that type of job. And I don't know if you know about disability insurance policies, but I as a healthcare provider, it's very common for, like, for instance, a surgeon, right? He'll insure his hands, or maybe insure his eyes. And you get these very high priced disability insurance policies that if for some reason you have some tragic accident or disability that you can't operate on someone anymore, you'll get paid out, right? You'll get paid, it's in essence a passive income until you retire. And these policies can be run in the hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're practicing for 40 years, right? So you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to hedge against maybe this 1% chance that you'll become permanently disabled and you can't practice medicine anymore. But no one is really hedging against you getting burnt out at your healthcare job and wanting to walk away. So, and that's much more likely to happen. So I kind of feel it's my duty and my calling to just teach, like, hey, I see myself in you, and the burnout could come when you hit your 40s. So what are you doing to prepare so when it does come, you have more options?
I think the way the healthcare industry is structured, because I have a coaching client who's building up one right now, and I've got another coaching client who's an emergency room doctor or nurse. I think you need to treat it like you're in the major leagues of the NFL.
100%. I 100%.
High money, short window, impact, out.
Exactly. I 100% agree. And I think more and more younger people entering the field are starting to see it, but it's kind of it's hard to see it until you're in there, right? But once you become exposed to that constant grind in healthcare, it is like you got to make what I think is like you got to make the money. And I've done the math on paper just for some friends of mine. It's like, hypothetically, say you're a new healthcare provider, mid six-figure income, you're 33, and at 35, you start buying a deal a year. And it's totally doable if you live within your means, right? You start buying a deal a year. Maybe it's a small deal, maybe it's a passive deal, whatever it is. And you start stacking these income streams. You just commit to the process 100%, deal. You're not living on the cash flow. You're reinvesting the cash flow. You're reinvesting the profits on sales, and you just keep layering deal after deal after deal. When you hit 45, 47 years old, you've got a lot of options, right? And I think wealth is options. I used to think wealth is like, how much money do I have in my bank account? How much money did I make last year? Let's see if I can one up myself. But really, if my only option to make the money is to go into the hospital, then I don't really feel that that's a wealthy option, right? If you're 47 and you have the option to take a leave of absence from work, or to walk away, or to go part-time, that is options, and that's wealth to me now.
What I hope that everybody hears from my content, or my message, or your message, or anybody that comes on this podcast, and I know you do, and that's why I bring it up, is that I can't tell you how many times a week that I hear from a 45 to 50-year-old man who would give everything in his life to have his freedom back, or have bought multifamily sooner, or have vested it passively, or have done a number of the things so he could spend the time with his family or spend the time with his kids. And that's why this content's out there, because I want to shake every 18 and 19 and 20-year-old and say, if you focus and you put some money away and you invest in some deals when money when you're sleeping, that you can get to where you need to go really quickly. And you can be retired at 32 per se, retired at 35. Like I see it every day.
No, yeah, it's definitely doable for sure.
Yeah. So as you dip into these larger syndication deals and these new construction, where do you see yourself going over the next couple of years? Where do you think, because, one of the things I wanted to touch on with you is, like, I know, like, putting yourself out there has been something that you've been working on. You're in a profession for so long and stuff, and just talk about, like, the power of putting yourself out there and what you've seen when you've done it, and maybe inspire other people.
Yeah, it's you almost have to change your identity, right? Like I want to go from Ryan, the anesthesia provider, to Ryan, the real estate investor. And I think I successfully did that on a local level. I mean, I had people walking up to me in the hospital that I barely even know, like, hey, what do you think about this deal? I get emails from surgeons and, like, oh, I got pitched this deal in, like, Podunk, Georgia, on this apartment complex. What do you think? I'm like, hey, like, I don't really know that town. I mean, I think you should talk to the sponsors and feel them out, So, you have to start changing your identity. And I started doing that locally, but I knew I needed to do that a little bit more, to my larger network, whether it be on social media, So I started a newsletter, and the response has been great. People have been more than happy to have conversations, and they want to learn more. And a lot of people aren't really exposed to these opportunities. And being in real estate, you think like, oh, everybody knows about this, everyone's doing it. But really, in my network of nurse anesthetists and physicians, I know hundreds and hundreds of them. Maybe 2 or 3 people have invested in passive deals. Maybe 2 or 3 people own rental properties, but the other 500 or 600, they're not invested in real estate at all, or not invested in any type of passive income, deal.
Well, I think I mentioned this to you, and I know I've mentioned it to Savannah, and I know I've mentioned it to other people that are in certain industries and niches. Like, people need to see a line from A to B. Like, if I'm going to invest with you, or if you're going to position yourself as like a leader, like, they need to see A to B. So if they see somebody in your field that's doing something that can create value to them, they will see you as the expert.
No, yeah, 100%.
And I think whether by design or whether by just purely taking action, I think you position yourself as that well, which is going to serve you over and over again, right? And I know we've talked about this, but I think it's super important to understand that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you asked me where I see myself going. So right now, I've been really working on forming strategic partnerships with boots on the ground people in Houston, in Austin, in Dallas. Texas is my state, so most of the investors that I'm around, they want to invest in Texas, right? I think it's a pride thing, and so I've been positioning myself, because multifamily is a completely different game. I can build a duplex with myself and a builder and really no one else. But if it comes to buying a $5 million building, it's a team approach to do that. Somebody needs to be able to raise money. Somebody needs the deal. Somebody needs a track record. Even if I had money to buy the building almost cash now, probably the broker wouldn't even sell it to me, because I personally haven't done that. So partnerships are key. And so that's kind of what I've been focusing on. But, eventually I would like to be the lead sponsor in some of these bigger deals.
And I'll be honest with you, and I want you to record this, and I want you to listen to it. The moment that you do that, I think that money that you're going to need is going to come way easier than you think, because they see just like I spoke about, they see the direct line from you to them, and they're like, dude, I want that. Right. And so it's just going to be, finding the deal, getting the repetitions, but it's so awesome to see, you kind of explode. I know we talk a lot about real estate, and it just warms my heart to see somebody going after what they want to and succeeding and making the relationships. And this is what it's all about, is building those, like you said, strategic relationships to create the momentum. But also, more importantly, I think the reason that it's so easy for you is that your heart's in the right place. And I think that if your heart's in the right place and your why's bigger than a number, I think you're going to get to where you need to go.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's not really about a number. It's more about. I'm really enjoying the process, but it's definitely a lot of work. And I think I was listening to another podcast just about entrepreneurship in general, and they said it's the only field where you'll work 80 hours a week to shed a 40-hour-a-week job. It's true. Yeah.
So before we get out of here, if you could give a little piece of advice to anybody out there that's working a high-end job, maybe they're burnout, maybe they're feeling overwhelmed, and they're looking for a way out, what advice would you give to them just to kind of crack the shell and get started?
I would say, you likely worked hard, and you probably spent a lot of money on education to build your active income stream, but see your job not necessarily as a calling, or not necessarily as something you love to do, but see it as an income stream only. See your job as a business, right? So now, how can you leverage your income, even though you're burnt out, to create more passive income and make that be your new passion? And in essence, is what this podcast is about, right? Construct your life. So you have a tool to construct your life, is your active income stream. So use your active income stream to learn, get educated, network, and take action to build whatever life you want, and include passive income in that life, so you control it more.
Boom. Nothing more. So if people want to find out about you, they want to follow the journey, how would they do that?
Yeah, so I do have a website under construction, but it's not up yet. But you can feel free to text me anytime. My phone number is 292-3320. And my email is ryan@streamstackinvest.com.
Love it. Guys, if you got some value from this episode, make sure you send it out to your friends. Rate us and review us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Austin. Thank you for having me.
You got it.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.